Welcome to The Author Show, where we present new authors and books. From fiction to self-help and everything in between, you'll find it all here. To watch the TV version of our program, visit authorswebtv.com. That's authorswebtv.com. And now, let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming the program author Arleen Alleman, and Arleen is the author of A Current Deception. Arleen is a former analyst with the United States Government and Accountability Office, where she wrote extensively on many topics ranging from satellite systems to endangered species. Her interests include reading, health and fitness, world religions, and travel. Her world travels supply authentic backdrops for her stories. Born in England and raised in New Hampshire and Nevada, she now lives in Florida with her husband, Tim. A Current Deception is her fifth Darcy Farthing novel. Arleen, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Don.
Well, let's start with the big question. Tell us about this book, please.
Well, this is a murder mystery. It takes place on a cruise ship, so there's lots of travel involved. There's a lot of scientific and biological aspects to it as well. But in the end, it's a good old-fashioned whodunit with a wonderful, beautiful scientist who's the protagonist.
Now, who did you write your book for specifically?
Males and females, men and women, anyone over the age of 16 say they love the book. People who especially are fiction, love mysteries. People who love travel, particularly.
Now, would you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you could say runs throughout your book?
There is a humanist theme in the book. There's a humanist theme because my protagonist is a humanist. She's driven by science and rational thinking, and that is a central message that comes through for anyone who'd like to understand better what that all means.
If you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
I think that beyond wanting readers to enjoy this book, because that is my main value that I want to add, that it will be a compelling fiction read. Beyond that, I think that it might provoke some unconventional thinking patterns. That is, make people think a little bit outside their box. If we're able to see small things in a different light, maybe we can see larger things in a different light as well. And there are some themes running through the book that help people to look at things like relationships, family, science, history, or religion in a little different way.
Now, if you could compare this book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
That is a difficult question. I think that maybe James Patterson's Women's Murder Club, just from the standpoint of a very strong female protagonist solving crime. Also, there's Temperance Brennan by Kathy Reichs. That's the Bones fame on TV, the character Bones. She is a humanist, as my protagonist is, and a scientist. So pragmatic, intelligent female crime fighters, but in books that are not intended to be women's literature per se.
So where did you get the ideas for the themes of computer hacking and physical alteration in this book?
That's a part of my writing process. It's a creative process. And while it's happening, I'm not totally aware of it. But basically what happens is I envision a setting and possible variables that will add interest to the book. And once I hit on an idea, then I do a lot of research on it and I expand it and make it fit. In this book, along with those two elements that you mentioned, those came into being because I needed to talk about types of deception. Also, that's what led to the inclusion of foodborne pathogens, bacteria, and also the yellow crazy ants being in the plot.
Now, was it hard creating believable situations, or did you take these situations from real life?
They're not really taken from real life, other than the fact that I try to include contemporary sort of newsy elements in all my stories. I do try to make them believable despite some inevitable exaggeration that heightens the suspense and makes for a fun read. The difficult thing is making sure that I've researched the background and the legal issues and the law enforcement parts enough to provide realism. So I've come to embrace that old adage that truth is stranger rather than fiction, because all you have to do is read the news to see that that's true.
Who was your favorite character to write?
Well, of course, I have to say, not surprisingly, that Darcy Farthing, my protagonist, is my favorite. She's a vehicle used to express ideas. Sometimes they're controversial. She speaks her mind, and she's a little edgy. She's a highly moral person that's interested only in the real world, in rational thought and actions, and she rejects any kind of supernatural or belief in the supernatural. And so she's really my favorite. And, of course, she is the main character, so...
Do you have any characters in this book that you think will be disliked, and if so, why?
Yeah, there is a character who I'm not going to name because it's a huge spoiler in this case. He is a nemesis of hers, and he is so controlling and so violent and antisocial that it's hard to find a redeeming quality in him. And he's kind of fun to write from that standpoint because he's so bad.
How much of your main character is based on you?
Well, we both have a humanist outlook. We both have a science education, and we both love nature. And I'd say that she might be almost a role model for me, not an alter ego. And otherwise, we have very different lives and experiences. But she hates bigotry and prejudice, and so do I.
Now, you said that various world locations supply the backdrops for your stories. Why did you choose Australia for this book?
In these books, all of them, I have written about places where I have personally been. And in this case, yes, I went to Australia for 5 weeks a few years ago and went to the places that are described in the book. And as a matter of fact, I tailored the fictional cruise route to match the places that I have been so that I can then do more research on them and come up with these interesting tidbits that Darcy tells the reader about as they're sailing around all these places.
How much of this book is fiction versus nonfiction elements like history and geography?
There are a lot of those little tidbits, history and geography and anthropology and science, and it seems, honestly, to try to say maybe 10% is nonfiction, that's probably all it is. The book is mostly fiction, but the 10% part is kind of interesting and educational as you go along with the action, as long as it doesn't interrupt the flow of the action too much. That's what I'm trying to accomplish, putting in this educational elements without interfering with the fun whodunit aspect.
In what ways do the characters' lives and relationships fuel the storyline?
Well, in a very big way. As in the beginning, you mentioned this is a series, and that's true, but this book does stand alone. I go out of my way to write them so that they do. But the fact remains that the characters' evolving relationships and the previous plots have led to this current storyline. They've been growing and changing through all the books and fighting some of the same villains. And in this case, there's a honeymoon and a wedding for some of these characters that happens on the ship. And so it's very much driven by the things that have happened to the characters in the past.
What does the yellow crazy ant have to do with the story?
The yellow crazy ant subplot it's there to create a feeling throughout this book that there's a connection between the human beings and these insects. Now, the all ants are the most intelligent of all insects. And there's a billion of them on the planet. They're going to be here after we're gone. And so I use them in this book to sort of show how evolution has provided adaptations for survival. And they become, in a way, in a sort of an odd dichotomy, they become viewed as not only a menace that needs to be eradicated, but also as sympathetic characters. They're also victims in this case. And they lend maybe a little bit of almost dark comic relief as the plot thickens.
Why did you choose a cruise ship for the setting?
The previous books in this series have cruises in them down around all of South America, the Caribbean. Some of the books take place in different settings on land in the United States. But in this case, a couple of previous books have actually described a future cruise to Australia. And I wanted to wrap that up in this book and actually follow through with what my readers are expecting. And this will probably be the last book that takes place on a cruise ship, actually.
Is there going to be another installment?
Yes. The reason that the cruises came about to begin with was that I was doing a lot of cruising personally, and I used those, as you said earlier, as a backdrop for these stories. The next story, however, that I'm writing is going to take place in Las Vegas. It'll be the 6th in this series, and it has to do with some very real life and very disturbing problems that have to do with street teens, homeless teens, and human trafficking and Asian gangs. So it'll be familiar and new characters and in that Las Vegas setting, but no cruise.
What's been your most rewarding experience since publishing this book?
Well, since publishing this book, I would just say that I'm very gratified about the acclaim that I've gotten from reviewers. Wonderful comments about how people enjoy these books and want to go on and read other books in the series. My overall work with all of these novels in the series, I have won a couple of awards, and that was very gratifying.
If someone were to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Oh, well, maybe it's never too late. I seem to have gone through some life stages in a different order than most people, and I like my protagonist. I keep trying different things. I'm very much a generalist, and I think it is never too late to try, to change, to learn new things.
How would you describe your writing style?
Well, hopefully the style imparts a feeling of reality. It's a compact, conversational style, I'd say. It appeals to readers' objectivity, I think. There's very short chapters, which a lot of readers tell me they appreciate. It's written in the first person when the chapters are from Darcy's own perspective, and in third person for other characters' personalities and perspective. I hope it's a fast-paced, compelling style that appeals to a lot of readers.
Who or what would you say influenced your writing the most?
I have spent 50 years reading fiction myself, so many of those writers have obviously influenced me. I think that just to come up with somebody fairly recently, Diane Gabaldon's Outlander series I loved. I thought that I just admired the way that she was able to bring historical perspective to her characters and the realness of the characters. Also, I love James Michener's inclusion of biological elements and history in his novels. I remember being very young, 13 or 14 years old, and I was reading a volume of Edgar Allan Poe's books, and I remember that being the very first time I ever had the thought of how writing novels would be a wonderful way to make a living. Now, I did not act on that until about 6 years ago, but so I would say perhaps that was also an influence.
In your opinion, who should buy this book?
Anybody over about the age of 16 who loves travel and loves to read murder mysteries and basically wants to have their thinking challenged, wants to kind of step outside maybe their normal thinking processes and understand a little bit more about what humanist thinking is. Men and women both love the books, and they appreciate the nonfiction elements as well as the fictional stories.
Time is getting very short, so the most important question, where can readers find you and your book?
Yeah, well, all over the internet, pretty much. The books are available in hard and soft cover as well as ebook formats. They're at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, any bookstore you go into. If they're not carrying it, they can order it at the order desk. I have a website, ArleenAlleman.com, where readers can learn a lot about the books, read excerpts, get little news items. Also, the book can be published from the publisher, xlibris.com. They have a bookstore as well. Many, many places. If you just Google my name or Google the name of the book or Darcy Farthing, you will find many places to get the books.
Could you spell your name for us, please?
Arleen, A-R-L-E-E-N, Alleman, A-L-L-E-M-A-N.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been Arleen Alleman, and she is the author of A Current Deception. Arleen, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Please share this interview with your family and friends so that they too may have the opportunity to discover our guest and her work. And why not spread the word on social media? We look forward to you joining us next time for another great book and another great author on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. To contact us, call toll-free 1-877-955-8800. That's 877-55-8800. Or visit theauthorshow.com, theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.